What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved icons walks into what he thinks is a light-hearted morning show appearance, only to realize he's the target of a televised ambush? What you're about to witness is the moment Danny DeVito's legendary patience finally snapped, live, on air, turning a routine interview into one of the most explosive showdowns in morning television history. The cameras were rolling, millions were watching, and no one was prepared for what happened next. Before we dive in, be sure to subscribe and drop a comment, because after this, you'll never look at Live TV the same way again. It started like any other Tuesday morning at the Good Morning America studios. Danny DeVito arrived early, coffee in hand, chatting warmly with the makeup crew about his latest project. The 78-year-old actor was in high spirits, excited to promote his new environmental documentary, a deeply personal passion project he'd spent the last 3 years developing. He had specifically requested Good Morning America, believing it would be a thoughtful platform to spotlight the climate crisis the film explored. "You're glowing this morning, Danny," the makeup artist smiled, adding a final touch of powder. "I'm pumped," he grinned. "Why filmed in remote places? Real people, real impact. I think George is going to love this." But Danny didn't know what George Stephanopoulos had actually been preparing. While Danny was rehearsing facts about melting glaciers and environmental justice, George had spent the night reviewing a completely different kind of dossier. One filled with decades, old tabloid rumors, edgy stand-up clips, and every controversial role Danny had ever played. The network wanted ratings, and nothing sells like a scandal. As Danny stepped onto the set, he greeted the audience with a warm wave, settling into the familiar interview chair. The lights felt bright but welcoming. The crowd buzzed with admiration. George approached with his polished TV smile, shaking Danny's hand for the cameras. "Danny DeVito, everyone." George beamed as the audience erupted in applause. "Thanks for having me, George," Danny said, adjusting in his seat. "I've been looking forward to this. The documentary, it's everything to me." George nodded, but something in his eyes felt off. "Yes, we'll definitely get to that," George said with a subtle shift in tone. "But first, I think our viewers might be interested in some of your other recent activities." Danny's smile faltered. "Other activities?" he asked. "Well, I mean, this documentary's been my world for the past few years. That's really why I'm here." "Of course," George said, theatrically flipping through his notes. "But before we get into your environmental work, I think it's important we give the audience a fuller picture of who you are." A hush fell over the crowd. Danny leaned forward, his brow furrowing. "I'm not sure I follow." "What do you mean, who I am?" George's smile tightened. "Well, Danny, you've made a career out of playing, let's say, morally questionable characters. The Penguin in Batman, Frank Reynolds in It's Always Sunny. These aren't exactly role models. Don't you think there's a responsibility that comes with your platform?" Danny blinked, stunned by the pivot. "George, with all due respect, you're confusing fictional characters with reality. That's like saying Anthony Hopkins is a cannibal because he played Hannibal Lecter." "But is it really the same?" George pressed, his tone sharpening. "For decades, you've portrayed characters who glorify drinking, gambling, scheming, destructive behavior. At what point does that blur into who you really are?" The color drained from Danny's face. "George," he said slowly, "I came here to talk about climate change. About something real. I don't understand what this is." "Climate change," George echoed, shuffling more papers. "Yes, let's talk about that. But isn't it a bit hypocritical for someone whose career glorifies waste and excess to suddenly brand themselves an environmental crusader?" Danny's jaw tightened. "Excuse me." George leaned in. "Let's look at your filmography. Matilda, you played an abusive father. Batman Returns, a villain who tries to kill children. It's Always Sunny. Your character commits fraud for fun. And now you want us to take you seriously as an activist. The studio was dead silent. Danny gripped the arms of his chair. George, I don't know what kind of stunt you think this is, but this is not the conversation I agreed to have. Inappropriate. George echoed with a smirk. What's inappropriate is a celebrity using their fame to push political causes when their body of work contradicts everything they're preaching. Danny's voice rose. Wanting a livable planet is a political agenda now. Caring about the environment is controversial when you use your fame to influence public policy. Yes, that's political, George snapped. And frankly, Danny, I'm not sure you're the right messenger for this message. Danny stared at him, eyes narrowing. Not the right messenger. He repeated in a whisper. Let me get this straight. You invited me here to talk about my documentary, and now you're attacking me over roles I played decades ago. As if that defines who I am. George didn't flinch. I'm asking the questions viewers want answered. When celebrities become activists, their credibility is fair game. Danny let out a bitter laugh that echoed through the stunned silence. You want to talk about credibility? He shot back. Let's talk about a journalist who tricks his guests into ambush interviews instead of having a real conversation about things that matter. The camera operators exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't in the script, but the raw tension was undeniable. Danny, I think you're overreacting, George said smugly. These are valid questions about your public persona. No, Danny interrupted, his voice cutting like steel. What you're doing isn't journalism. It's performance. You're not here to inform. You're here to provoke. And you've just proven exactly why people don't trust media anymore. And just like that, the tone of the interview shattered. One of Hollywood's most respected actors had flipped the script, turning the lens back on the host and the system behind him. Whether you think Danny overreacted or spoke truth to power, one thing's certain. This wasn't the interview anyone expected. And it's a moment no one will forget. Overreacting. Danny's voice cracked with disbelief. George, I've been in this business for over 40 years. I've done thousands of interviews. And never, not once, have I been treated with this level of blatant disrespect by someone who calls themselves a journalist. George scoffed. Disrespect. Danny, I'm doing my job. I'm asking the hard questions. The ones other interviewers are too starstruck to touch. Danny leaned forward in his chair, his small frame somehow growing larger in that moment, taut with fury. Your job. Your job is to inform the public, not stir up tabloid drama to chase ratings. Do you have any idea how much time, money, and soul went into this documentary? We interviewed climate scientists across 6 countries. We filmed in coastal towns where people are watching their homes disappear beneath the sea. George didn't even look up. I'm sure that means a lot to you, he said coolly, flipping his notes. But our viewers care about who Danny DeVito really is, behind the characters. Danny's smile vanished completely. Who I really am. His voice was rising now, hands gesturing with the familiar fire that made him a legend. I'll tell you, I'm someone who gave 2 years of my life and a large chunk of my own money to shine a light on something that's killing our planet. I'm someone who believes that if you have a platform, you use it to help. But clearly you're more interested in gotcha sound bites than actual dialogue. George's smile stretched thinner. Danny, I understand you're passionate, but you have to admit, your past work raises valid questions. When someone spends decades portraying criminals, creeps, and chaos, it's only natural for the public to be skeptical when that same person tries to rebrand as a moral authority. The audience was shifting now, whispers rippling through the seats. The tension was no longer subtle. It was thick, undeniable. Danny saw it, and it fueled him. Skeptical, he stood. The room seemed to shrink as he did. George, let me educate you on a little thing called acting. It's a profession where people pretend to be someone else. For entertainment. The fact that I've played villains doesn't make me one. It makes me good at what I do." "Please sit down, Danny," George said, his voice sliding into a patronizing tone that made even the camera crew flinch. "You're kind of proving my point about your temperament." "My temperament?" Danny stayed standing, fists clenched. "You ambush me. You mock a documentary about real-world suffering. And when I push back, you question my temperament." "I'm just trying to have an honest conversation," George replied, his fox sincerity now so transparent it practically dripped off the set. "But it seems like you're not willing to discuss your career choices in a mature way." But Danny's laugh was bitter and sharp. "You want to talk about maturity. A mature journalist would have done their homework. A mature journalist would know I've been advocating for environmental causes for over 20 years. A mature journalist wouldn't confuse fiction with reality." George was unfazed. If anything, he looked pleased by the chaos he was stirring. "I've done my homework," he said. "I know about your environmental work. I also know about the bar fights, the public arguments, the reports of difficult behavior on set. These things matter when you're trying to position yourself as a moral leader." The studio froze, the hum of background noise gone. Even the technical crew stopped moving. Danny's face darkened. His voice dropped. "Bar fights," he said slowly. "Public arguments." He took a breath. "You're really going to dig up tabloid trash from the 1980s and present it as truth. Is this where we are now?" "I'm reporting what's been documented," George said smoothly. "Our viewers deserve the full picture." Danny stepped forward, close to George's desk now, his fury barely contained. "Here's the full picture. George, I'm a 78-year-old man who's spent a lifetime in this business. I've made people laugh. I've made them think. And yes, I've played some dark roles. But I've never pretended to be something I'm not." George raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting I'm pretending?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Danny said flatly. "I'm saying it. You're dishonest with your viewers, with me, and with yourself if you think this qualifies as journalism." The words hit like a slap. George's composure cracked, just for a moment. His smile wavered, his eyes flashing, but then the mask returned. "Danny," he said carefully, "you might want to be very cautious about the accusations you're making. This is live television." "Cautious." Danny let out a laugh that sounded like a growl. "You want me to be cautious? After you spent the last 10 minutes trying to assassinate my character. After you dismissed years of my work and questioned my integrity based on fictional characters, you want me to be careful." The audience was glued to the moment, leaning in, covering mouths, jaws dropped. They'd never seen anything like this. George was starting to sweat. He glanced at the cameras. This was spinning out of control. "Danny, I understand you're upset," he said, his voice trembling slightly now. "But I'm just doing my job. Sometimes that means asking the tough questions." Danny exploded. "No, George. A tough question would be asking about filming in remote areas with limited resources. About how we gathered climate data. About how rising sea levels are destroying homes. What you're doing. This isn't journalism. It's character assassination disguised as curiosity." George tried to shuffle his papers, tried to reclaim authority, but it was already gone. "I think our viewers can decide for themselves whether my questions were appropriate," he said weakly. Danny turned to the audience. His voice filled the room. "Let me ask you something," he said, arms wide. "Did you come here today expecting real conversation? Or to watch a respected guest ambushed with gossip? Did you tune in to learn about climate change? Or to see my life's work dismissed because I once played a villain in a movie?" Heads nodded. Murmurs of support grew louder. Danny turned back to George, eyes locked in. "You see that? Those are real people, and they can see what you're doing. They know the difference between real journalism and whatever this spectacle was supposed to be." George's face turned red, the veneer cracking. His professional mask was slipping, piece by piece. Gee, Danny, I'm going to need you to lower your voice and take your seat. This is supposed to be a professional interview. Wise. Bitter laugh. Professional? George, there's nothing professional about what you've done today. You've trampled every basic principle of ethical journalism. You've betrayed your audience, wasted everyone's time, and shown total disrespect for the environmental crisis I came here to talk about. Dagioji's snapping. Environmental issues you're not qualified to speak on. You're an actor, Danny, not a scientist, not a policymaker. Just another Hollywood celebrity who thinks fame gives you the right to lecture regular people on how to live. The studio went dead silent. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Danny stood still, his face shifting from disbelief to hurt to pure, simmering rage. Dan la lo measured, not qualified. Let me explain something to you about qualifications. I spent 18 months working side by side with Dr. Sarah Chen from MIT, one of the world's foremost climate scientists. I interviewed Professor James Mitchell at Oxford, who's been studying Arctic ice loss for 30 years. I've collaborated with marine biologists, atmospheric physicists, environmental economists. He leaned forward, eyes locked on George. Dan, why? But you wouldn't know any of that, would you? Because you didn't bother watching the documentary. You didn't research the science. You didn't even come prepared. You saw a chance to stir controversy, and you jumped at it. George opened his mouth, but Danny cut him off. Dan, why? You know what's really pathetic? While you're sitting here playing gotcha with my credibility, real people are suffering. Families in Bangladesh are watching their homes drown. Farmers in California are losing everything to drought. Entire island nations are vanishing. But that's not dramatic enough for you, is it? Doesn't boost the ratings. A Georges saw weekly. Danny, I think you need to calm down. Denwai, voice rising, calm down. He erupted. Voice thundering through the studio. Danwai, you want me to calm down while you dismiss the most urgent threat facing humanity as celebrity activism. While you weaponize ignorance and call it journalism. While you turn your platform into a tool for cynicism instead of truth. He began pacing, voice cracking with years of frustration. Danwai, do you have any idea what it's like to care so deeply that you spend years of your life and millions of your own dollars trying to wake people up, only to be mocked by some smug anchor calling it a publicity stunt? Do you even grasp what it feels like to watch the planet burn while people like you peddle tabloid trash instead of actual news? George tried again to speak, meekly. Danny, if you could just. Day and Wise snapped. Nope. Danny slammed his palm onto George's desk with such force that papers scattered and fluttered to the floor. I'm talking now, George, he said, voice edged with steel. For the first time in this entire circus of an interview, I'm going to say something that actually matters. The audience gasped, but Danny didn't flinch. He wasn't performing anymore. He was done playing nice. You want to know who I am, he said, turning to face the studio. I'm someone who gives a damn about the planet, about truth, about the kind of world we're leaving behind for our children. I believe facts matter more than ratings. That truth should matter more than manufactured controversy, and that journalism, real journalism, is supposed to inform the public, not bait celebrities into shouting matches for views. He paused, scanning the stunned faces around him. I came here today to share some of the most important work of my life. Not a movie, not a role, but a real, years-long effort to understand and communicate the science behind the climate crisis. And instead, I got ambushed by a man who apparently thinks tearing people down is the same as doing his job. George cleared his throat, trying to regain control. Danny, I respect your passion, but I think it's unfair to characterize my questions as an ambush. I was simply trying to provide context for our viewers. Danny stopped pacing, turned, and stared at him. Context, he repeated, slow and deliberate. George, the only context here is that you've either proven yourself entirely unfit to conduct a serious interview, or you're so addicted to ratings that you're willing to sell out your integrity to get them. Either way, pathetic. Danny walked back toward his chair. But he didn't sit. Instead, he reached down, unclipped the microphone from his shirt, and placed it neatly on the seat. You know what? I'm done. I've been doing interviews for 40 years, and I've never walked out. But I'm walking out of this one, because life's too short, and this issue is too damn important to waste another second on whatever this was supposed to be. He turned to the audience one last time. To those of you who came here to learn something, I'm sorry you had to witness this. But if you're serious about climate change, if you actually want to understand what's at stake, the documentary airs next month. No drama, no spin, just facts. I believe in letting the work speak for itself. And with that, Danny DeVito strode off the Good Morning America set. Behind him, George Stephanopoulos sat frozen, surrounded by scattered notes and silence. The ambush had detonated, but not the way he'd planned. What was meant to be a viral takedown had instead become a spectacular act of self-destruction. For several beats, the studio was completely still. Then, slowly, one person began to clap, then another and another. The applause swelled, following Denny off camera like a wave crashing behind him. George remained at his desk, humiliated, his career's most embarrassing moment playing out live, in real time. And the cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of the most devastating morning show meltdown in television history. If you watched this unforgettable showdown, don't forget to hit subscribe and drop a comment below. Whose side are you on, Danny's or George's?